It started with flashing blue and red lights on a quiet road, an all-too-familiar scene that quickly spiraled into something no one could have expected. A decorated police officer seizes a high-tech luxury car from a young tech entrepreneur under the flimsiest of pretenses. At first glance, it seems like a simple abuse of power, but the tables turn in the most extraordinary way within minutes. Once commanding and arrogant, the officer is reduced to pleading for mercy as the very car he stole becomes his inescapable prison. Go back. What could push a man of authority to such desperation? And how does an ordinary citizen fight against systemic corruption using nothing but her brilliance and the technology she created? Before we dive into this gripping tale of power, betrayal, and redemption, comment below where you're watching from today. And if you're as captivated by this story as we are, don't forget to subscribe so you never miss another extraordinary tale like this one. The late afternoon sun painted long golden streaks across the deserted highway as Lena Carter navigated her meticulously maintained Solaris EV around a gentle curve. The car's sleek design and cutting-edge technology always brought her a sense of pride and joy. As the founder of a flourishing tech consultancy, Lena saw her car as a mode of transportation and a symbol of her achievements. Bookmark, go back. She lightly tapped her fingers on the leather steering wheel, humming to a soft melody playing through the premium sound system. The quiet solitude of the drive felt like a well-earned break after a long day of client meetings and product launches. Her eyes darted to the dashboard, where a notification about the car's battery health flashed briefly before fading away, another reminder of its state-of-the-art features. Suddenly, the tranquility was broken by flashing red and blue lights in her rearview mirror. Confused, Lena glanced at the speedometer, well within the legal limit. She signaled and carefully pulled over to the shoulder, the tires crunching on the gravel. Through the side mirror, she saw a tall, broad-shouldered police officer step out of the patrol car. His deliberate, measured steps and the rigid set of his jaw made Lena's stomach tighten with unease. As he approached, Lena caught sight of the name badge on his uniform, Officer Damon Price. License and registration? Price barked before Lena fully rolled down the window. His tone was clipped and professional but noticeably cold. Of course, officer, Lena replied, keeping her voice calm as she reached for her documents. May I ask why I was pulled over? Price ignored her question. He took the documents with barely a glance at her face, his flashlight sweeping across the car's pristine interior. The beam lingered on her laptop bag in the passenger seat, then the neatly arranged tech devices mounted on the dashboard. Quite the setup you've got here, he said, his voice tinged with suspicion. A lot of expensive equipment for someone like you. Lena straightened her posture, her professional instincts kicking in. Yes, I own a technology consulting firm, she said, keeping her tone measured. Everything here is standard for my work. Price raised an eyebrow, skepticism evident in his expression. A technology firm, huh? And you can afford a car like this? Heat rose to Lena's cheeks, but she maintained her composure. Yes, she said firmly. I'm the founder and CEO of Carter Systems. We provide cybersecurity solutions for several major corporations. Price's flashlight moved across the car's interior again, slower this time, as if searching for something incriminating. Stay in the vehicle, he ordered, turning on his heel and returning to the cruiser with her documents. Lena's unease grew as Price spoke into his radio, occasionally glancing at her car. The minutes stretched on endlessly, the silence amplifying her tension. When he finally returned, his expression was even more closed off than before. Step out of the vehicle, Price commanded, his voice devoid of explanation. Officer Price, Lena said, carefully reading his name tag. I still don't understand why I've been stopped. Have I done something wrong? Price's lips pressed into a thin line. Let's just say I had a hunch, he replied vaguely, his hand resting on the holster of his belt. A hunch? Lena repeated, her voice tinged with disbelief. About what, exactly? Step out of the car, he said again, ignoring her question. Lena hesitated but complied, her movements slow and deliberate. As she stepped onto the shoulder of the road, she noticed Thou Price's eyes narrowed at her designer blazer and heels. His scrutiny felt invasive and judgmental. Price began circling the car, shining his flashlight along its exterior. This vehicle doesn't exactly scream legitimate owner, does it? He said, his tone smug. Lena clenched her fists at her sides, frustration bubbling beneath the surface. This car is registered in my name, she said firmly. I have all the paperwork to prove it. If you just... I don't need to see any more paperwork. Price interrupted, waving her off dismissively. But it's all here, Lena pressed, pulling out her phone. Digital copies of the purchase agreement, insurance details, everything. Put the phone away, ma'am, Price said sharply. I'm confiscating this vehicle as part of an ongoing investigation. Ongoing investigation? Lena's voice rose slightly, her disbelief evident. You haven't even told me why you pulled me over. Your continued arguing only makes you look more suspicious. Price shot back, his tone icy. Now the keys, please. Lena's hands trembled as she clutched the keys to her prized car. You can't just take my car without cause, she said, her voice thick with emotion. Price stepped closer, his imposing figure casting a shadow over her. You can hand over the keys now, he said, or we can continue this conversation at the station. The threat hung heavy in the air. Trembling, Lena reluctantly handed over the keys. You'll be contacted when the investigation is complete, Price said, sliding into the driver's seat. Wait, Lena called after him. How am I supposed to get home? We're in the middle of nowhere. But Price didn't respond. The silent hum of the electric motor was the only sound as he drove off, her car disappearing into the distance. As the red taillights vanished around the bend, Lena stood alone on the empty road, the cold evening breeze sending a shiver down her spine. A wave of helplessness washed over her, quickly replaced by simmering anger. She had done everything right, provided her documentation, remained calm, and yet, her car, filled with personal belongings, had been taken unjustly. This wasn't the first time Lena had faced such scrutiny, but she refused to accept it passively this time. Her heart raced as an idea began to form. She reached into her pocket for her phone, her determination hardening. If Officer Damon Price thought he could get away with this, he was about to learn just how wrong he was. The stolen Solaris EV glided smoothly along the dimly lit road, its near-silent motor a stark contrast to the storm brewing in Lena's mind. Inside the car, Officer Damon Price gripped the wheel tightly, a self-satisfied smirk playing at the edges of his mouth. Another confiscation for his record, a tactic he had used countless times before. This one's different, he muttered, glancing at the dashboard with its sleek digital interface. The car, unlike any he had seized, was filled with advanced tech far beyond his comprehension. A soft chime from the dashboard interrupted his thoughts. An alert flashed, an unfamiliar symbol glowing red against the blue interface. Bookmark. What now? Price grumbled, jabbing at the screen with his finger. The alert remained unyielding. A low whirring sound came from the car's interior, as if in response to his frustration, followed by mechanical clicks. The windows rolled up automatically, and the doors locked with an audible clunk. What the hell? Price's smirk vanished as he tugged at the door handle. Nothing. The car's vents closed, the air inside growing heavy and still. A voice filled the cabin, calm and deliberate. Officer Price, we need to talk about proper police procedure. Startled, Price's eyes darted around the car's interior. Who's there? He barked. Show yourself. You already know who I am, the voice replied, calm and composed. It was Lena Carter, speaking through the car's integrated communication system. I'm the rightful owner of this vehicle. And you, officer, have just made a grave mistake. Cold sweat formed on Price's brow as he realized the depth of his predicament. He was trapped in a machine he didn't understand, controlled by a woman he had grossly underestimated. You think this scares me? Price growled, trying to maintain his bravado. He fumbled with the buttons on the dashboard, hoping to disable whatever was happening. Instead, the screens flickered to life, displaying lines of code scrolling rapidly, lines that meant nothing to him, but everything to Lena. Stop pressing buttons, officer, Lena's voice warned. You're only making it worse for yourself. The car's lighting shifted, the interior bathed in alternating hues of red and yellow. Price could feel the temperature inside drop as the air conditioning activated. It wasn't unbearable, but it was enough to unnerve him further. Listen, he said, his voice faltering. This is illegal. You can't just... Illegal. Lena cut him off, her tone sharp. You want to talk about illegal? You stopped me without cause, profiled me, and stole my property under the guise of a fake investigation. Price's grip on the steering wheel tightened. I was doing my job. Your job, Lena interrupted again, her voice laced with contempt, is to serve and protect, not abuse your authority to target innocent people. And let me remind you, Officer Price, that this vehicle has full surveillance capabilities. Cameras, microphones, everything you said and did has been recorded and uploaded to a secure server. Price's blood ran cold. The display showed crystal-clear footage of their earlier interaction, complete with his dismissive tone and unfounded accusations. You've got no right, bookmark. No, right? Lena's voice hardened. Do you know how many times people like me have been harassed, humiliated, or worse by officers who think the rules don't apply to them? You picked the wrong target this time, Price. I've built my career on exposing security flaws and taking down systems that oppress the vulnerable. And you? You're just another flawed cog in the machine. Price's facade of confidence began to crumble. What do you want? He asked, his voice trembling. For starters, Lena replied, I want you to understand what it feels like to be powerless. The way you made me feel when you took my car, my belongings, and my dignity without a shred of evidence. The vents shifted again, a low hiss filling the cabin. Price's breathing quickened as the temperature dropped further. Let me out, he shouted, pounding on the windows. You can't do this, can't I? Lena's voice was calm, almost mocking. This is my car, my property. And right now, Officer Price, you're trespassing. Price slumped back into the seat, his earlier arrogance replaced by fear. Please, he whispered. I made a mistake. I'll give the car back. I'll do whatever you want. Just let me go. Lena's silence was deafening. Price's mind raced, imagining the potential fallout if the recordings were released, his career destroyed, his reputation in tatters. You're not the first person to abuse their authority, Lena said. But maybe, just maybe, you'll be the first to learn from it. The car system powered down momentarily, the lights dimming. When they came back on, Price found the doors unlocked. He wasted no time, scrambling out of the car and onto the side of the road. Lena's voice came through the speakers one last time. Consider this your warning, officer. I won't be so lenient if I hear of you targeting someone like me again. The Solaris's motor purred to life and the car sped off into the night, leaving Price alone on the deserted road. The humiliation and fear he had felt were new to him, emotions he had often inflicted on others without a second thought. As he stood there, watching the car disappear, Price realized this wasn't just a bad day on the job. This was the beginning of his reckoning. Lena Carter sat in her home office, surrounded by glowing monitors displaying live footage of the Solaris EV's journey. She had recalled the car remotely, guiding it back to her through the advanced security system she had designed herself. Her heart was still racing, but her mind was clear. The encounter with Officer Damon Price had been a blatant abuse of power, but it wasn't just about her anymore. As she reviewed the car's surveillance system, recordings of Lena's fingers flew across the keyboard, isolating specific clips of Price's actions and words. His casual arrogance, unfounded accusations, and smug sense of authority were all captured in vivid detail. But something else caught her attention, a fragment of radio chatter in the background. She rewound the audio, isolating the signal. Dispatch, this is Unit 47. Price's voice crackled through the speakers. Confiscated the target vehicle. Looks like a jackpot. Lena frowned. Target vehicle? Jackpot? The word suggested this wasn't just a rogue cop acting on impulse. She delved deeper, her systems scanning for any connected signals or patterns. Within minutes, she uncovered a series of communications between Price and other officers. Their coded language referred to confiscations and drops, always involving high-end vehicles. The pattern was clear. This wasn't a one-off abuse of power, but part of an organized operation. Her jaw tightened as she pieced it together. Officers like Price targeted people who didn't fit their assumptions of wealth and couldn't fight back quickly. They were using their badges as cover for the theft and trafficking of luxury vehicles. She leaned back in her chair, staring at the screen. Her fingers tapped rhythmically on the armrest as she contemplated her next move. She couldn't let this slide. Miles away, Officer Damon Price sat in his darkened apartment, nursing a drink. His hands trembled slightly as he replayed the events of the evening in his mind. The humiliating loss of control in Lena's car haunted him. He glanced at his phone, which had been buzzing with messages all night. Some were from colleagues, asking why he hadn't returned to the station. Others were from his partner, Officer Cole Manning, demanding an update on the delivery. "What am I supposed to tell him?" Price muttered, running a hand through his hair. He knew the operation wasn't just about him. Higher-ups were involved, people with far more power and influence than he could imagine. Suddenly his phone buzzed again. This time it was a call from Manning. "Where's the car, Price?" Manning's voice was sharp, impatient. "There was a complication," Price admitted, his voice strained. "A complication?" Manning growled. "What the hell does that mean?" Price hesitated. He couldn't tell Manning that he'd been outsmarted by the car's owner and left stranded like a fool. "It means I'm working on it," he said instead. "Well, you'd better fix it," Manning snapped. "The boss won't be happy if we lose this one. You know how much it's worth." The call ended abruptly, leaving Price staring at the blank screen. His chest tightened as the weight of the situation pressed down on him. He was in over his head, and he knew it. Meanwhile, Lena had already begun laying the groundwork for her next move. Her expertise in cybersecurity gave her access to tools most people couldn't dream of. She mapped out the network behind Price's actions using the data she'd extracted from her car. Initially, the names weren't familiar to her, but as she dug deeper, she found connections to local businesses, law enforcement, and even city officials. Each thread she pulled revealed a more extensive web of corruption. One name stood out: Lieutenant Garrett Morrison, a senior officer with an unblemished public record, but a history of suspicious dealings behind the scenes. Lena found transactions linking him to shell companies specializing in automotive exports. Further investigation revealed these exports often involved stolen luxury vehicles. She clenched her fists, her anger burning hotter. This wasn't just about her car anymore. It was about an entire system preying on vulnerable people. Lena knew she couldn't take this on alone. She needed someone on the inside who could navigate the tangled web of police politics and provide her with intel. She hesitated for a moment, then opened a secure communication channel. Price's phone buzzed, pulling him from his thoughts. He frowned at the unfamiliar number. Against his better judgment, he answered. "Officer Price," Lena's voice came through the line, calm but firm. His stomach dropped. "How did you get this number?" "I have my ways," Lena replied. "And right now I have a proposition for you." "I'm not interested," Price snapped, but there was a tremor in his voice. "You should be," Lena said coolly. "Because if I release the footage of what you did tonight, your career will be over by morning. And that's just the beginning." Price fell silent, his mind racing. "I know about the operation, Price," Lena continued. "The confiscations, the fake investigations, the stolen vehicles. I have enough evidence to bring you and your entire network down. What do you want?" Price asked finally, his voice barely above a whisper. "I want justice," Lena said, "and I want you to help me get it." "You're crazy," Price muttered, shaking his head. "No," Lena countered, her voice like steel. "I'm determined, and whether you like it or not, you will help me." She gave him a moment to process before delivering her ultimatum. "You have a choice, officer. Work with me to expose this corruption or face the consequences alone. Your call." Price swallowed hard, his mouth dry. The weight of her words pressed down on him, leaving him with no good options. After a long pause, he exhaled heavily. "Fine," he said. "I'll help you. But if this goes south, we're both screwed." "Then let's make sure it doesn't," Lena replied. "We start tomorrow." As the call ended, Lena leaned back in her chair, her resolve unshaken. Price may have been part of the problem, but now he was a tool for the solution. And together, they were about to bring a corrupt system to its knees. The morning light streamed through Lena Carter's sleek home office, glinting off the monitors and devices surrounding her. She leaned forward in her ergonomic chair, eyes scanning the network map she had built overnight. Every connection, every name, every transaction illuminated the sprawling operation she was about to dismantle. On the other end of a secure video call, Officer Damon Price sat in his dimly lit apartment, his face drawn and tired. He hadn't slept much. The gravity of the situation weighed heavily on him, Lena's request and his reluctant decision to assist her. "You're going to explain everything," Lena said, her tone sharp. "Names, locations, how this operation works, every detail. Price rubbed the back of his neck, hesitant. Look, I don't know everything, he admitted. But I know enough to help you. The operation is bigger than just Manning or Meg. Lieutenant Morrison runs it. He's the one pulling the strings. Morrison, Lena repeated, her fingers flying across her keyboard. She pulled up the files she'd uncovered on him. The same Morrison who's been funneling stolen cars into shell companies? That's him, Price confirmed grimly. He uses his position to make it all look legitimate. The cars get marked as confiscated under investigation, then disappear into his network. And where do they end up? Lena asked. Most of them are stripped for parts or exported overseas, Price explained. It's a lucrative business. They target high-end vehicles like yours with enough tech to fetch a premium price. Lena leaned back, digesting the information. And how many people are involved? More than you'd think, Price said with a sigh. It's not just the officers. Buyers, middlemen, and even people in City Hall keep the operation under the radar. Morrison's got leverage on a lot of them, the dirt they can't afford to come to light. Lena's jaw tightened. And how do you fit into this? I did my part, Price admitted, shame coloring his voice. I'd pull people over, make up a reason to confiscate their vehicles, and deliver them to designated drop points. In return, I'd get a cut. How noble, Lena said coldly, her gaze piercing through the screen. Price winced. I'm not proud of it, he said quietly, but I want to make it right. That's why I'm here. Then let's make it right, Lena replied. We're going to take this down, piece by piece, but we'll need solid, irrefutable evidence that ties Morrison and his network to these crimes. For the next several hours, they worked tirelessly. Lena outlined the plan with meticulous precision, leveraging her expertise in cybersecurity and Price's insider knowledge of the operation. The first step is gathering more data, Lena said, pointing to the network map on her screen. We need access to Morrison's personal files. If he's running this operation, he'll have records somewhere, financial transactions, communication logs, something we can use. Price nodded. He keeps sensitive documents in his office at the precinct, but it's locked down, physical files, digital backups, everything. That's not a problem, Lena said confidently. I'll create a distraction to get you in there. Once you're inside, I'll guide you through accessing the files. Price frowned. And what happens if I get caught? Morrison already suspects something. He's been asking questions since I botched the confiscation last night. Then you'll need to be careful, Lena replied. But if we pull this off, you'll have the leverage you need to expose him without implicating yourself further. The tension in the room was palpable, even through the video call. Price leaned forward, his expression serious. This isn't just about Morrison, is it? No, Lena admitted. This is about every person like me who's been targeted by people like you. It's about changing a system that lets this kind of corruption thrive. Price nodded slowly. For the first time, he felt the faint stirrings of something he hadn't felt in years, a sense of purpose. The following evening, Price walked into the precinct, his heart pounding. The familiar buzz of phones and chatter of officers filled the air, but to him, everything felt different. He was a double agent now, navigating a minefield where one wrong move could end everything. He made his way to Morrison's office, nodding to colleagues who passed him in the hallway. None of them suspected the real reason he was there. As he approached the door, he glanced at his watch. Right on time, his phone vibrated with a message from Lena. Distraction in 3, 2, 1. A sudden commotion erupted in the bullpen. The lights flickered, and computer screens across the precinct displayed a flashing error message. Officers scrambled to figure out what was happening, leaving the hallway outside Morrison's office momentarily deserted. Price slipped inside, closing the door quietly behind him. His hands trembled as he approached the locked filing cabinet. "All right, I'm in," he whispered, activating the small earpiece Lena had given him. "Good," Lena's voice came through, steady and calm. "The passcode for the lock is 8429. Morrison uses the same one for everything." Price entered the code and the lock clicked open. Inside, he found a trove of documents and hard drives. He snapped photos of everything, his movements quick and precise. "Got it," he said. "Now plug the USB into the computer," Lena instructed. "I'll remotely copy the data." Price inserted the drive into Morrison's desktop. A progress bar appeared on the screen, inching forward agonizingly slowly. Hurry up, Price muttered. I'm going as fast as I can, Lena replied. Just keep calm. Footsteps echoed in the hallway outside. Price's heart raced as he turned off the monitor and crouched behind the desk. The doorknob jiggled, but the door didn't open. The progress bar reached 100%. Done, Lena said. Get out of there. Price removed the USB and slid it into his pocket. He locked the filing cabinet, smoothed his uniform, and stepped back into the hallway as if nothing had happened. Back in her office, Lena watched the data transfer complete. Her monitors filled with files, transaction logs, emails, and incriminating communications. We've got him, she said, her voice triumphant. But she knew this was only the beginning. The evidence was damning, but it wasn't enough to dismantle the entire operation. They'd need more allies, more leverage, and more courage to see this through. Lena sat at her workstation, surrounded by glowing monitors, as the files from Morrison's computer continued to upload to her secure server. The deeper she delved into the data, the more horrifying the scope of the operation became. It wasn't just stolen vehicles. There were connections to money laundering, bribery, and even ties to criminal organizations operating far beyond the city's limits. This is worse than I thought, she muttered, her fingers hovering over the keyboard. She had everything she needed to implicate Morrison, but one man's downfall wouldn't be enough to bring down the entire network. Her phone buzzed, snapping her out of her thoughts. It was a message from Damon Price. We need to talk. This is bigger than just Morrison. Lena frowned, but quickly typed back a reply. An hour later, Price arrived at Lena's home office. His expression was grim as he stepped inside, scanning the room full of high-tech equipment and glowing displays. You weren't kidding about being a tech genius, he said, trying to lighten the mood. Lena didn't smile. What did you mean? Bigger than Morrison? She asked, crossing her arms. Price hesitated, then sighed heavily. Morrison's just one piece of this puzzle, he said. There's someone else, someone higher up. State Senator Raymond Hartley. He's the one pulling the strings behind the scenes. Lena's brow furrowed. A senator? Why would a politician care about stealing cars? It's not just about cars, Price explained. It's about power. Hartley uses the profits to fund his campaigns, bribe officials, and keep people loyal to him. Morrison and the others are just his enforcers. Lena's anger flared. So the corruption runs all the way to the top. Price nodded grimly. And he has connections everywhere. Judges, business leaders, even federal agents. That's why no one's ever touched him. Lena's mind raced. Taking down Hartley would require more than just technical expertise. They'd need allies who could help expose the operation from the inside. Do you know anyone who can help us? Lena asked. Price hesitated. There are a few officers I trust, he said finally. People who've seen what's going on but are too scared to speak out. If we can convince them, we might have a chance. Lena nodded. Then let's get to work. The next day, Price made a series of discreet phone calls. First, he contacted Officer Sarah Nolan, a sharp and principled investigator who had always been vocal about her disdain for corruption. Price? Nolan's voice was wary when she answered. Haven't heard from you in a while. I need your help, Price said, keeping his tone low. There's something big going on at the precinct, bigger than anything you've seen. I can't explain everything over the phone, but I need to know if I can count on you. Nolan was silent for a moment. You've got my attention, she said cautiously. What's this about? Meet me tonight, Price said. I'll explain everything. By the end of the day, Price had assembled a small team of trusted allies. Sarah Nolan, the investigator with a reputation for honesty, Detective Marcus Reyes, a seasoned officer who had been quietly gathering evidence of corruption for years, Officer Jenna Patel, a rising star in the department who had witnessed suspicious activities but lacked the power to act. Lena met with them that evening in a rented warehouse she'd turned into a temporary command center. As the officers gathered around a table strewn with files and monitors, Lena stepped forward, her presence commanding. Thank you for coming, she began. I know this isn't easy, and I know the risks you're taking just by being here. But if we don't act now, this corruption will only spread. She clicked a button on her laptop, projecting images and documents onto a large screen. Morrison's transaction records appeared, followed by emails tying him to Hartley. This is what we're up against, Lena continued. It's not just about stolen cars. It's about a system of abuse and exploitation that reaches the highest levels of power. and we have the tools to expose it. The room was silent as the officers absorbed the magnitude of what they were seeing. Finally, Reyes spoke up. "You're saying Hartley's the mastermind?" he asked, his voice heavy with disbelief. Lena nodded. "And Morrison is his enforcer. But we can't just stop with them. We need to take down the entire network." Nolan leaned forward, her expression serious. "What's your plan?" Lena glanced at Price, who gave her a small nod. "We're going to gather as much evidence as possible," Lena explained. "Then we'll release it all at once, files, recordings, everything, so there's no way they can cover it up." "And how do you expect to get this evidence?" Patel asked skeptically. "I've already hacked into Morrison's system," Lena said, earning a few raised eyebrows. "But Hartley's files are a different story. We'll need someone on the inside to get close to him." The room fell silent again. Everyone knew what that meant. "I'll do it," Price said finally. Nolan raised an eyebrow. "You? After everything you've done, why should we trust you?" Price met her gaze, his expression earnest. "Because I've seen what this corruption does," he said, "and I'm done being a part of it. I want to make things right." Nolan studied him for a moment, then nodded. "All right," she said, "but if you screw this up, we're all going down." Price exhaled, relief washing over him. "I won't screw it up." As the meeting ended, Lena pulled Price aside. "You didn't have to volunteer for this," she said quietly. "Yes, I did," Price replied. "If I don't, who will?" Lena nodded, a small smile tugging at the corners of her mouth. For the first time, she saw not just a corrupt cop trying to redeem himself, but a man willing to fight for what was right. "We'll make this work," she said. "Together." Price nodded, steeling himself for the challenge ahead. The faint hum of city noise filtered into the air as Damon Price parked his car a few blocks away from the exclusive restaurant known as the Gilded Falcon. Inside, State Senator Raymond Hartley was hosting one of his infamous fundraisers. To most of the city, it was a networking event for politicians and high-profile donors. To Price and Lena, it was a den of corruption where Hartley orchestrated his criminal empire. Price adjusted the microphone hidden in the lapel of his blazer and glanced at his phone. Lena's voice came through the earpiece, calm and steady. "Audio is clear," she said. "The signal's stable. You're good to go." Price swallowed hard, gripping the steering wheel. "Remind me why I agreed to this again? Because if you don't," Lena replied dryly, "we'll never get the evidence we need. Now, get moving. You've got this." Sighing, Price stepped out of the car and smoothed his jacket. The weight of what he was about to do pressed on him, but there was no turning back now. Inside the restaurant, the atmosphere was one of opulence. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling, casting a warm glow over the room, filled with sharply dressed attendees sipping champagne and discussing business deals. Price scanned the crowd, his stomach tightening as he spotted several familiar faces, colleagues from the force who were far too cozy with Hartley's inner circle. "See Morrison?" Lena's voice crackled in his ear. Price subtly tilted his head, his eyes landing on Lieutenant Garrett Morrison, who stood near the bar, laughing with a group of men in tailored suits. "He's here," Price murmured. "Along with half the precinct, it seems." "Stay focused," Lena said. "Hartley's your target. Remember, we need recordings of him discussing anything related to the operation. Get him talking." Easier said than done, Price thought. He made his way to the bar, casually ordering a drink while keeping an eye on the senator. Hartley was seated at a private table, flanked by 2 bodyguards and a small group of wealthy donors. Price sipped his drink, carefully observing the flow of the room. Finally, he saw his opening. Hartley's bodyguards stepped away to deal with a minor commotion near the entrance, leaving the senator momentarily unguarded. "Here goes nothing," Price muttered under his breath, making his way to the table. Hartley looked up as Price approached, his sharp blue eyes assessing the man in front of him. "Officer Price," he said smoothly, gesturing for him to sit. "I've heard a lot about you." "Good things, I hope," Price replied, sliding into the seat across from him. Hartley chuckled, a practiced sound that didn't reach his eyes. "That depends on who you ask." Price forced a smile, his heart pounding. "I wanted to thank you for the opportunities you've created," he said, keeping his tone light. "Morrison speaks highly of you and everything you've done for the department." Hartley's expression shifted, a glimmer of amusement in his eyes. "Garrett's a loyal man," he said. and loyalty is a quality I value highly. Price leaned in slightly. That's why I wanted to introduce myself. I admire what you've built here. It's impressive. Hartley tilted his head, studying Price like a predator sizing up its prey. Impressive, he repeated. That's one word for it. There was a pause, the tension between them palpable. Price forced himself to maintain eye contact, praying Lena was getting everything. Let me ask you something, officer, Hartley said finally, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial tone. What do you think of how things are run in this city? Price hesitated, choosing his words carefully. I think there's a lot of opportunity, he said, for those who know where to look. Hartley's lips curved into a slow smile. Good answer. In her home office, Lena listened intently, her fingers hovering over the controls of her system. The microphone was picking up every word, but she knew Price had to tread carefully. Keep him talking, she murmured under her breath, willing Price to maintain his composure. Hartley leaned back in his chair, swirling the amber liquid in his glass. Let me tell you something, Price, he said, his tone turning darker. This city isn't run by politicians or police chiefs. It's run by men who understand how the world works. Men who know how to take what they deserve. Price nodded, feigning agreement. That's why I'm here, he said. I want to be one of those men. Hartley laughed, a low, rumbling sound. Ambitious. I like that. He gestured for Price to lean in closer. There's a shipment coming in next week, Hartley said in a hushed tone. High-end vehicles, worth millions. Morrison's handling the logistics, but we could use an extra set of hands to keep things smooth. Price's stomach churned, but he kept his expression neutral. I'm in, he said simply. Hartley smiled again, his teeth flashing in the dim light. Good. I'll have Morrison send you the details. The rest of the night passed in a blur. Price stayed just long enough to avoid suspicion before slipping out of the restaurant and into the cool night air. You did it, Lena's voice came through his earpiece as he walked briskly to his car. We've got everything we need. Price exhaled, his shoulders slumping with relief. He mentioned a shipment, he said, next week. High-end cars? Then that's our next move, Lena replied. But for now, get some rest. You've earned it. As Price drove home, his mind raced. The operation was bigger and more dangerous than he'd imagined. But for the first time, he felt like he was finally on the right side of the fight. Back in her office, Lena began organizing the recordings, her determination sharpening. Hartley's arrogance had been his mistake, and she intended to make him pay for it. But she also knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. The deeper they dug, the more dangerous their enemies would become. Still, as she stared at the files on her screen, she allowed herself a small smile. They were getting closer to exposing the truth and taking down the corruption that had poisoned the city for far too long. The abandoned warehouse stood silent against the backdrop of the city skyline, its rusted exterior masking the high-stakes operation unfolding inside. This was the meeting point for Senator Hartley's latest shipment, a collection of high-end stolen vehicles, including some designed with cutting-edge technology. Lena Carter sat in a van parked 2 blocks away, surrounded by monitors displaying live feeds from hidden cameras and drones. The equipment buzzed softly as she adjusted the controls, her eyes darting between the screens. We're in position, Officer Sarah Nolan's voice crackled through Lena's headset. Nolan and the rest of the team were stationed nearby, disguised as dock workers and security guards. Good, Lena replied. Stay sharp. Price is already on site. Inside the warehouse, Damon Price stood near a row of gleaming vehicles, each one meticulously arranged for transport. The air was thick with the smell of motor oil and the distant hum of machinery. Price wore a work jacket and cap to blend in with the crew, but his eyes were constantly scanning the room for potential threats. Lieutenant Garrett Morrison strode in, flanked by 2 other officers, his presence as commanding as ever. He barked orders to the workers, his voice echoing off the steel walls. Everything needs to be loaded and ready within the hour, Morrison snapped. Hartley doesn't like delays. Price tensed as Morrison approached him. Price, Morrison said, his tone gruff. Good to see you stepping up. Just here to help, Price replied evenly, hoping his unease didn't show. Morrison narrowed his eyes. You've been keeping a low profile lately. That better not mean you've gone soft on us. Price forced a smile. Not a chance. I know how this works. Good, Morrison said, slapping him on the shoulder. Make sure it stays that way. As Morrison walked away, Price exhaled slowly. The plan depended on him staying under the radar long enough to gather critical intel. From her van, Lena monitored the warehouse through the drones she had deployed earlier. The live feeds showed every angle, capturing the movement of workers and the vehicles being prepped for transport. Nolan, Reyes, Patel, Lena said into her mic, addressing the officers on her team. We've got confirmation, Morrison, and the cars are in place. Hartley's men should be arriving any minute. Everyone ready? A chorus of affirmations came through the headset. Remember, Lena continued, her voice steady. We need Morrison and Hartley discussing the operation on record. Price, stay close to Morrison. Let him do the talking. Got it, Price murmured. Minutes later, the sound of tires screeching outside signaled the arrival of Hartley's convoy. A sleek black SUV pulled up to the warehouse, followed by 2 unmarked vans. Hartley stepped out, flanked by his ever-present bodyguards. He adjusted his tie, his sharp gaze sweeping over the scene as he approached Morrison. Morrison, Hartley said, his voice smooth and commanding. Is everything ready? Of course, Morrison replied with a slight bow of deference. The vehicles are pristine, and the paperwork is all in order. Hartley smiled coldly. Good. Let's make this quick. I don't like lingering in places like this. Price moved closer, careful to stay within earshot while appearing busy. The tiny microphone embedded in his collar picked up every word. In the van, Lena listened intently as the conversation unfolded. She recorded every detail, her hands flying across the keyboard to tag key moments in the audio. Keep them talking, she whispered, her eyes glued to the screen. Back in the warehouse, Hartley examined one of the cars, running a hand along its sleek frame. How much are we expecting for this shipment? Bookmarker back. About 3.5 million, Morrison replied confidently. Buyers in Dubai are particularly interested in the newer models. Hartley chuckled. Excellent. And the cops? Morrison smirked. Taken care of. The ones we can't buy off are too scared to interfere. Hartley nodded approvingly, then turned his gaze to Price. You're new to this level of the operation, he said. Tell me, Officer Price, are you as reliable as Morrison says you are? Price met his gaze, forcing himself to stay calm. I do what's needed, he said. Hartley studied him for a moment, then nodded. Good, because if anyone here steps out of line, they'll regret it. The tension in the warehouse was thick as workers began loading the cars into the vans. Price's heart pounded as he glanced around, making sure everything was proceeding as planned. Nolan, he whispered into his hidden mic. They're moving the cars. Are you ready? We're in position, Nolan replied. Outside, Nolan and her team were stationed near the warehouse exits, their vehicles disguised as delivery trucks. Inside one of the trucks, Detective Marcus Reyes checked his weapon and nodded to Patel. Once we get the signal, we move, Reyes said. Back in the warehouse, Hartley was finishing up his conversation with Morrison. This operation has been smooth so far, Hartley said. Let's keep it that way. Price took a deep breath and decided to push his luck. What about the new buyers? He asked, feigning curiosity. Are they as reliable as the last group? Hartley raised an eyebrow but didn't seem suspicious. We've vetted them, he said. They're eager and well-funded. No issues expected. Price nodded, relief flooding through him as Hartley turned his attention elsewhere. Lena, Price whispered, we've got what we need. Tell them to move. From her van, Lena activated the drones, sending them flying low over the warehouse to create a distraction. The buzzing noise echoed through the building, drawing everyone's attention. What the hell is that? Morrison barked. As the workers scrambled to figure out what was happening, Nolan's team made their move. They burst into the warehouse, weapons drawn, their badges gleaming under the harsh lights. Police! Nolan shouted. Nobody move. Chaos erupted as Hartley's bodyguards drew their weapons, but they were quickly subdued by Reyes and Patel. Morrison froze, his hands raised in surrender, while Price moved to secure the workers. Hartley, however, didn't go quietly. You've made a mistake, he snarled as Nolan cuffed him. You have no idea who you're dealing with. We'll see about that, Nolan shot back, dragging him toward the waiting squad cars. In the aftermath, the warehouse was swarming with officers. The stolen cars were impounded, and Lena's recordings were sent directly to her secure server. In her van, Lena leaned back, exhaling deeply. They had done it. Hartley, Morrison, and their entire operation were finally exposed. The morning after the raid, headlines blazed across every major news outlet. State Senator Raymond Hartley arrested in corruption and car theft scandal. Police raid uncovers criminal empire, dozens arrested. Tech whiz and former cop expose corruption at the highest levels. Lena Carter sat in her office watching the news coverage unfold on multiple screens. Footage from the raid played on repeat, showing Hartley being led away in handcuffs, his once imposing demeanor reduced to bitter anger. Next came interviews with Detective Sarah Nolan and her team, who recounted their role in dismantling the operation. Lena's phone buzzed on the desk, flooded with messages from journalists, tech enthusiasts, and community leaders applauding her efforts. She ignored them for now, her focus fixed on the files still uploading to her secure server. Every detail needs to be airtight, she murmured to herself, tagging and organizing the evidence she and Price had gathered. This wasn't just about taking down Hartley, but ensuring his entire network crumbled with him. Across town, Damon Price stood outside the precinct, his hands jammed into the pockets of his jacket. He watched as officers buzzed in and out of the building, some casting wary glances in his direction. For years, Price had walked these halls as part of the problem. Now, he was an outsider, neither fully trusted nor fully redeemed. His thoughts were interrupted when Detective Nolan stepped outside, her expression unreadable. "Price," she said, walking up to him. "Got a minute?" He nodded, following her to a quiet corner. "They're processing the evidence," Nolan said, her voice low. "Hartley and Morrison won't be able to talk their way out of this. We've got them dead to rights." "That's good," Price said, though his tone lacked conviction. Nolan studied him for a moment. "You did the right thing," she said. "I know it wasn't easy, but you helped take down a system that's been rotting this department from the inside." Price gave a small, humorless laugh. "It doesn't feel like enough," he admitted. "Not after everything I've done." "Maybe not," Nolan said, "but it's a start." Back at her office, Lena received a call from a familiar number. "You've been quiet," she said as she answered. "I needed some air," Price replied. "How are you holding up?" Price sighed. "I don't know. Watching Morrison and Hartley get hauled away should feel like a win. But it doesn't. I keep thinking about all the people I hurt before I got here." Lena leaned back in her chair, her voice softening. "You're not the same person you were back then. You've made mistakes, but you've also made a difference. That matters." There was a pause before Price spoke again. "What happens now?" "Now," Lena said, her voice sharpening with determination. "We make sure this never happens again. The evidence we've gathered is enough to start a ripple effect. Other people, journalists, activists, even some honest cops will take it from here." "And you?" Price asked. "I'm not done," Lena replied. "There are still systems to expose, people to hold accountable. This was just one battle." Price was silent for a moment, then said, "If you need help, I'm in." Lena smiled, a genuine warmth spreading through her. "I'll hold you to that." The fallout from Hartley's arrest spread quickly. Within days, several of his allies were implicated in the scandal, leading to more resignations and arrests. The city's political and law enforcement landscape began to shift as investigations unearthed years of corruption. Bookmark, go back. Citizens rallied for reform, demanding greater oversight and transparency. Community leaders called for independent audits of police practices and the establishment of watchdog organizations to prevent future abuse. Lena's role in the exposé didn't go unnoticed. Media outlets hailed her as a hero, a symbol of what technology could achieve when wielded for justice. Interviews and speaking engagements flooded her inbox, but she declined most of them, preferring to let the evidence speak for itself. One evening, Lena met Price at a small cafe on the outskirts of the city. The atmosphere was quiet, a welcome change from the chaos of recent days. "You clean up nice," Lena said with a smirk, noticing Price's neatly pressed shirt. Price chuckled. "Figured I'd try to look respectable for a change." They sat across from each other, the silence between them comfortable. "So what's next for you?" Lena asked. Price shrugged. "Haven't figured that out yet. I'm not going back to the precinct, that's for sure. I think my badge-wearing days are over." Lena nodded. "Maybe that's a good thing. You don't need a badge to make a difference." "And you?" Price asked. Lena's eyes lit up. "I've been working on something new, a program that uses AI to detect patterns of corruption in law enforcement data. It's still in the early stages, but I think it could prevent what happened to me from happening to anyone else. Price smiled. Leave it to you to turn a nightmare into a solution. That's the plan, Lena said, raising her coffee cup in a mock toast. To second chances, Price said, clinking his cup against hers. As the weeks passed, Lena and Price continued to collaborate, their shared mission evolving into a partnership neither had anticipated. Lena's tech expertise combined with Price's insider knowledge proved to be a powerful force for change. They launched a public awareness campaign, using the Hartley case as a catalyst to push for systemic reform. Workshops, panels, and community meetings brought people together, sparking conversations about accountability and justice. Price even found a new calling, mentoring young recruits at a community policing program. He shared his story openly, using his mistakes as a cautionary tale and his redemption as proof that change was possible. One evening, as Lena worked late in her office, her phone buzzed with a text from Price. She grabbed the remote and switched to the local station, where a reporter was covering a breaking story. Tonight, we bring you exclusive footage of a groundbreaking new initiative spearheaded by Lena Carter and former Officer Damon Price, the anchor announced. Their work has not only exposed corruption, but also laid the foundation for lasting reform. Lena watched as images of community events, workshops, and smiling faces filled the screen. For the first time in weeks, she allowed herself to relax. "We're making a difference," she whispered to herself. A month had passed since the raid on the warehouse, but the effects were still rippling through the city. The investigation into Senator Hartley and Lieutenant Morrison had expanded, implicating more than a dozen officials, officers, and business leaders. It was a reckoning years in the making, and Lena Carter and Damon Price were at the center of it all. Bookmark. For Lena, the fallout meant an endless stream of interviews and speaking engagements. But more importantly, it had given her a platform to push for the reforms she believed in. Her work wasn't just about technology anymore. It was about using that technology to dismantle systems of corruption and build something better in their place. For Price, the fallout was more personal. He'd spent weeks reflecting on his role in the system they had exposed, and now he was focused on making amends in any way he could. One bright afternoon, Price stood in a crowded community center, surrounded by young recruits in crisp uniforms. The room buzzed with nervous energy as they waited for their first training session to begin. Price adjusted his tie, feeling a pang of unease. It was his first time addressing a group since leaving the force, and he wasn't sure how they'd respond to his story. Lena watched from the back of the room, a small smile playing on her lips. "You've got this," she mouthed to him. Price nodded and stepped up to the podium. "Good afternoon," he began, his voice steady despite the tightness in his chest. "My name is Damon Price, and I'm here to talk to you about what it means to wear this uniform." He paused, letting his gaze sweep across the room. "For years I wore the badge. I told myself I was doing my job, serving the community and upholding the law. But the truth is, I wasn't. I let corruption, greed, and prejudice dictate my actions. I hurt people. I betrayed the trust that comes with this uniform." The room fell silent, the recruits hanging on his every word. "But I learned something," Price continued, his voice growing stronger. "It's never too late to change. It's never too late to do the right thing. That's why I'm here, not to make excuses, but to make sure you don't repeat my mistakes." He glanced at Lena, who gave him an encouraging nod. "This uniform is a symbol," Price said, "a promise to protect and serve, not just the people who look like you or agree with you, but everyone. If you remember that, if you hold on to that promise, you'll make a difference. A real difference." The room erupted into applause as Price stepped down from the podium, his heart pounding. He felt a hand on his shoulder and turned to see Lena smiling at him. "You were incredible," she said. "I just told the truth," Price replied. Later that evening, Price and Lena met at her office to review the latest developments in the Hartley case. The evidence they had gathered was still being analyzed, but the results were already staggering. Over $20 million in laundered money traced to Hartley's accounts, connections to at least 4 major criminal organizations, a network of bribery that spanned law enforcement, judiciary, and City Hall. "It's like peeling back layers of an onion," Lena said, scrolling through the latest reports. "Every time we think we've reached the core, there's another layer. Price leaned back in his chair, his expression thoughtful. "It's exhausting, but it's worth it," he said. "For the first time, it feels like we're actually making a dent." Lena nodded, her determination unwavering. "We've come a long way, but there's still so much to do." The next morning, Lena received an email from a national advocacy group requesting her input on a new initiative to promote police accountability. They wanted her to help design a software platform that could analyze patterns of misconduct and flag potential issues before they escalated. She forwarded the email to Price with a simple message: "What do you think? Want to help?" His reply came within minutes: "Absolutely." In the weeks that followed, Lena and Price worked tirelessly to bring the platform to life. They called it GuardianNet, a nod to the system Lena had used to reclaim her car and spark this entire journey. GuardianNet combined Lena's cutting-edge algorithms with Price's first-hand knowledge of law enforcement practices. The platform could analyze data from police departments across the country, identifying trends that indicated potential corruption or bias. "This could change everything," Lena said one night as they finalized the prototype. "It's a start," Price replied, "but it's going to take more than software to fix a broken system." "That's why we're not stopping here," Lena said, her eyes shining with determination. Their efforts didn't go unnoticed. GuardianNet quickly gained national attention, earning praise from civil rights organizations and law enforcement reform advocates alike. Departments across the country began implementing the platform, leading to tangible improvements in accountability and transparency. But for Lena and Price, the real reward came from the people whose lives they touched. One day, Lena received a letter from a young woman whose father had been falsely imprisoned due to corruption in their local precinct. Because of GuardianNet, the letter read, "My dad is finally coming home. Thank you for giving my family a second chance." Lena read the letter aloud to Price, her voice thick with emotion. "This is why we do it," Price said, his own eyes glistening. As the months turned into years, Lena and Price's partnership grew stronger. They continued to push for change, taking on new challenges and expanding their work to address systemic issues in education, housing, and healthcare. One evening, as they walked through the city together, Price glanced at Lena and said, "You know, I never imagined my life would look like this." "Neither did I," Lena replied with a laugh, "but I'm glad it does." Price smiled, his gaze thoughtful. "Do you ever think about how it all started? The traffic stop, the Tesla, everything?" "Every day," Lena said. "It's funny, isn't it? How something so small can change everything." Price nodded. "Yeah, it's almost like it was meant to happen." As they watched the city lights flicker in the distance, Lena and Price knew their work was far from over. But for the first time, they felt something they hadn't in a long time: hope. Together, they had turned a moment of injustice into a movement for change, proving that redemption wasn't just possible, but powerful. The story of Lena Carter and Damon Price is a powerful reminder of how courage, determination, and innovation can triumph over corruption and injustice. At its heart, this narrative showcases the transformative power of second chances and the strength found in unlikely alliances. Lena's journey began with an unjust act that could have left her feeling powerless. Instead, she chose to fight back, using her intelligence and technological expertise to expose a deeply rooted system of corruption. Her actions demonstrate that even in the face of overwhelming odds, one individual's determination can spark monumental change. Damon Price's redemption arc is equally compelling. His decision to confront his past mistakes and work toward justice reflects the difficult yet rewarding path of accountability and growth. Through his courage to make amends, he not only helped dismantle a corrupt system, but also found a renewed sense of purpose in serving his community. This story highlights the dangers of unchecked power and systemic corruption while emphasizing the importance of standing up for what's right. It also underscores the role of technology in holding individuals and institutions accountable, proving that innovation can be a force for good when paired with integrity and resolve. Above all, it's a testament to the idea that change is possible when people are willing to confront their flaws, fight for justice, and work together toward a better future. If this story moved you, we'd love to hear your thoughts. Did you find it inspiring? If you thought the story was good, leave a comment with a 1. If you thought it was amazing, comment with a 2. Have you experienced or heard of similar stories of courage, redemption, or justice? Share them with us. We'd love to hear your perspective. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel to ensure you never miss these meaningful stories that shine a light on hope, resilience, and transformation. Let us know what you think in the comments below, and be part of this community dedicated to celebrating powerful stories of change. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the following story.